Are you tired of the quick fixes that promise transformation, but leave you feeling more disconnected from your body than ever? Welcome to the Beyond Medicine Humanized Care for Women of Influence, where we go deeper than surface level solutions. I am Dr. Maria, a functional integrative physician specializing in women's health, metabolic dysfunction, and hormone balance. Here, we will uncover the root cause of insulin resistance, PCOS, thyroid, and adrenal issues, and explore how trauma, stress, and anxiety impact your well being. Because your body is not a microwave, it deserves personalized, compassionate care that honors its complexity. Let's embark on a journey to reclaim your health one conversation at a time. And today I have with me on the episode Mikkel. She is the owner of Mikkel Segal, MD, out of Vancouver, Canada. And we will be talking about stress and how that affects longevity. So, welcome to the chat today. Do you want to quickly introduce who you are, what you're doing, and why you are passionate about this topic?
Thank you, Dr. Maria. Yeah, so hi everyone. My name, as Dr. Maria said, is Mikkel Siegel. And my background is I did my medical school training and family medicine residency in Canada. And since then, I've really started learning about longevity medicine, lifestyle medicine. I always felt like there was sort of more to offer people in terms of their health and wellness. And so did a deep dive into those areas, just trying to get to the root causes and have a more personalized approach for people. And so I use those practices and my learnings in my practice, but as a way to reach out to more women and find ways to help people more. I did a coaching certification, and I've done since then done lots of trainings in different types of coaching, somatic coaching, leadership coaching, and really diving into that and finding ways to sort of use what I've learned and my approaches to help as many women as possible live their best life.
Love that, to help
Yeah.
women live their best life. And we're all here for that.
Yes.
So let's start the conversation. So, just to set the ground for our listeners, when we're talking about stress, how do you want our listeners to understand what stress is? And perhaps going a little bit into, should we always avoid stress or perhaps not? So, if you
Right.
can just explore that a little bit for us.
Sure. Well, obviously, the idea of stress, it's a huge topic, and there's lots of things that kind of come to mind when you talk about stress, but certainly all stress is not bad. We know that we do need some bits of stress in order to thrive. So there is a term called eustress, which is actually the good kind of stress. So stress, if it's at the adequate level, then it actually gives us energy and we're able to focus more. Even when you talk about sort of being in the zone or in that area, that's because you're using a bit of stress and our nervous system is priming ourselves to sort of be in that zone where our stress levels are up a bit so that we can focus and we can sort of achieve what we're trying to achieve. So that level of stress is good and needed. However, when most people think about stress, they associate it with a negative sort of connotation. And that's most of the time when we're thinking about sort of excessive stress. So we know that sort of in the curve, we have the eustress, but then if you go beyond like higher levels of stress, then it becomes not useful for us. And that's when our kind of body kind of shuts down and
Hmm.
not able to cope, and we get all the negative consequences of stress. So obviously too much stress is not good. It's sort of a perfect amount. Again, it will allow us to achieve what we want. And then of course, no stress at all is also not so good because then we're not motivated and we sort of the other end of the stress is felt to be possibly not ideal.
Yes. So, how can somebody know what if they're like in that ideal stress, what are some maybe cues that they can pay attention to in their own body about, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, go ahead.
I think if you find that you are feeling energized by the whatever it is that may be causing you sort of this stress, if it's causing you to feel energized, if you're able to really focus and achieve what you wanting to achieve, and and there's no, if we're talking about within the body, if there doesn't seem to be any kind of pains or, signals of the body that are causing you distress, that's probably a good sign that your stress levels are, within that good zone. If you're finding a lot of distress within your body or in your mind, if your thoughts are becoming quite distressing, if you're not able to focus, if if you're finding your body's kind of shutting down in different ways, then probably your stress levels are not in the zone that we would like them to be in.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. So when we talk about, okay, so there's a zone that perhaps we want to be in that helps us be energized and focused. But then you also mentioned the distress that it's
Mhm.
not beneficial. Let's just use that word. So when you think about why this is not beneficial, what would you tell the listeners? What is the problem with having too much of this distress in our minds, in our bodies, in our souls that
Mhm.
maybe we need to start to pay attention and do something about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people would understand that's not an, like, there's that kind of zone is not a place you want to live your life in because for obvious reasons, it's causing distress in your life, within your body, and it's not an optimal way to like live your life. So I'm sure there's consequences to that kind of zone to be in. Like you're probably not achieving the things you want to achieve. You're so distracted that you're kind of missing
Mhm.
out on, some of the positive things that are probably happening in your life. Your body is going to start rejecting that state as well. So I mean, when your nervous system is in that sort of zone, it's producing all sorts of neurochemicals that are meant to be in like that fight or flight period of time, but you're not supposed to be in that long term. So in the end, your body, starts responding to that in many negative ways. And then
Mhm.
there's hormone levels that specifically the cortisone that again is meant to be used for sort of intermittent periods of time. But when you have excess cortisol being produced by the body, we now know there's lots of negative consequences to that in all parts of the body. So it may not be immediately obvious that living in that zone is not going to be beneficial to your overall health. But I think very
Yeah.
quickly, most women will understand that it's not an optimal state.
Yes.
Mhm.
So you mentioned the nervous system, you mentioned chemicals,
Yeah.
hormones that just start to be released in our body, perhaps not at the like dose or concentration that just helps us be focused and energized. So since we want to talk about how this affects longevity,
Mhm.
can you then start to unpack? So, if you have more cortisol, if your nervous system is more activated in fight and flight response, if
Mhm.
the hormones in your body and the chemicals become unbalanced because of what's going on, how is it that this affects longevity? Can you just start to unpack that a little bit for us?
Sure. I mean, there's many ways, but the one that comes to mind that's pretty predominant is the effects of cortisol in the body. So, for sure, especially within the brain, we know that high cortisol levels actually, like, basically start affecting the brain in a way where the brain kind of starts to shrivel up. So, especially like the memory centers, you'll notice a change in your memory, and if they do MRI imaging, you can see those changes in the brain. So high consistent levels of cortisol will definitely affect your memory, your learning, your processing. And then it has effects throughout the body in all our organs. We know it just basically it causes the organs to start dysfunctioning. And so definitely in terms of if we look at like a longevity approach or aging well, because we all want to sort of be able to be running marathons when we're 80 and thinking clearly, we want to really try to manage our cortisol levels and get them within optimal range.
Yeah. So then it sounds like from what you're saying, so one, there is actually evidence and proof that being under a lot of stress not only increases your cortisol level, but that this cortisol actually has evidence that it changes how the brain is
Yes.
functioning, right? Like, so the areas of the brain, how they're activated and how it's working,
Yeah.
which helps understand why sometimes people with a lot of stress have difficulty focus, performing. They have issues with cognition, memory loss, like the simple stuff that sometimes they say is like brain fog. It's because of that changes that are happening. And then you said you want to keep your cortisol level low. So when you think about people that are you're in Canada, I'm in the United States. I still feel that in Canada, maybe things are not as chaotic as in the United States, but I might be wrong. But I'm wrong. Do you think that I'm
I
wrong?
think it's accurate. I think it's an accurate statement. Just
Yes. So when you think of the majority of the people listening to this conversation that lives in the Western culture or society, whether it's in Canada or in the United States, the reality is that we have a lot of demands over like our lives and our system. And we just deal with this culture that sometimes demands more of us that we can actually do. So, how can you tell people what are practical things that you can tell people these are things that you can do to keep your cortisol level low, besides the fact that they could go to their doctor and get their cortisol level checked? But what's the
Yeah.
practical things that they can do?
There's so many different techniques that you can use. Obviously, I think the first and the most important thing to do is just to acknowledge and notice that you're feeling stressed. So that's a huge thing. And because most people and women who are juggling home life pressures, work pressures, there's so many things on their plate, can just often go years sort of running around just in survival mode, not really like taking a step back and going, wait, hey, there's something going on here. And maybe I'm feeling stressed. And so I think like just even taking that step back and acknowledging and noticing how you're feeling, that's like 80% of it, really. Because I think once the awareness is there, then you can do things about it. So I think that's huge. And then, like I said, there are tons of different tools that you can use, and really, it's a matter of trying different ones out, seeing which ones work for you, which ones kind of work with your schedule. But even just taking a few deep breath, like breath work, you can either take like the four, count, take a deep breath, count to four, hold your breath, count to seven, then blow out, count of eight or breathe in and out like you're breathing through a straw. So there's different techniques in terms of breath work, but that is pretty simple, can be done at any time of day, any place and time. So that's an easy one to start with. So that's one that I usually recommend as a start. So I mean, that would be what I would say to start with, but there are like lots of other techniques that we could go into if you wanted to. But yeah, I think that's the first start.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. I like that you started with noticing.
Hmm.
And I find that and we know that this is true. Again, I find that in the Western culture, we're more about being in the brain and being up
Hmm.
here.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to notice or know or understand what's going on in our body, to like pay attention to the signals that we're getting from the neck down.
Hmm.
So when we talk about, let's say that you're working with a client
Mhm.
that is stuck in that noticing because they just do not know how to notice what's going on in their body. Again, what is something that can help people start to connect what's going on in the brain with what's going in the body and understanding that the body is sending us signals that are wise and that we want to, in a way, obey or listen to? So, what would you tell our listeners?
Like, yeah, again, I think it's just, it sounds almost too simple, but again, it's just paying attention to what is going on in our body. And we don't often do that unless we're, again, sort of aware of it and take that time. So I find there's lots of different apps you can use, but really just kind of sitting. And it's sometimes easier just to close your eyes or lower your eyes because it takes away the visual cues, but just really taking like 5 minutes and sitting and just paying attention to the sensations that you feel in your body. You don't have to interpret them. You don't have to kind of wonder what it is or what it means, but just sitting and just noticing what is going on in your body. And you can do a body scan, a simple body scan. There's lots of those online to find if if you want to be guided, but really just kind of paying attention to what do you notice is going on in your body? What do you feel? What's the temperature like? That kind of stuff. And that just, again, just if you do it regularly, then you just become a little bit more body aware and then you'll be more sensitive to signals that your body's sending you. So it's just sort of raising that awareness and that connection to what is going on in your body because our bodies really are quite intelligent and they're able to really share a lot of information with our brain and with
Mhm.
ourselves. So once you kind of become a little bit more body aware, it can be helpful and useful when you're feeling a certain way or just in terms of managing your life and your decisions and how you go about the world. If you bring your body awareness into it, it will shift things.
Yes.
Mhm.
So I like that you have mentioned a couple of things, and I'm just going to repeat and expand just for the listeners. So, a body scan, which, yes, you can, if you have never done one, you can start with doing one that is guided. And then once it becomes more familiar, you can even do it at any time of the day. It doesn't have to be this ritualistic thing that takes you an hour to do. Because a lot of the times people say, I don't have time. Well, these
Yeah.
are simple things that you can do
Yeah.
even before going into the next meeting, picking up your kids. You can get into your car since we use so much cars here, but you
Yeah.
can get into your car and just take this a deep breath and check in with how your body is after leaving work or as you transition from one activity to the other. Breath, sometimes we don't even realize it and we're just holding our breath. And our breath really has a great capacity to bring us down, to help us regulate. And sometimes, yes, doing the counting, the box breathing, all of those techniques are good. But if you just, again, take a really nice big breath and let it out, that by itself can just be like so wonderful. And immediately
Mhm.
you feel the difference in your body. And then I like also that with your conversation, even though you haven't mentioned it this way, but it's about being present in the moment.
Mhm.
And as you help your body be present in the moment, it also helps our mind be present in the moment so that our mind is not thinking about what we need to do tomorrow or in 2 or 3 hours. And because that by itself creates that distress that we're trying to reduce or avoid, depending on how much of it you have in your life. So, thank you for sharing all of that. So, when you think about women that are trying to be moms, spouses sometimes, they might be in a position where they're not only being caregivers of their own kids, but then of their parents, depending on the stage of life. They are trying to take care of the home, the bills. Like, all of these responsibilities that whether we are choosing to take over or that are imposed on us, that there are there.
Mhm.
So, what would you be if you want to give them some words of wisdom of, yes, this is life and we're still going to do these things that, yes, we need to do. But how can we, in the midst of that,
Mm,
do some, I'm just going to use the word self care, do some self care so that we can help our body self regulate, our mind be present, reduce that cortisol, and not only live longer, but live longer, as you said, functionally. What will
mhm.
you tell them?
Well, that's a tricky one. I don't know if there's one piece of advice, but I would say, as you said, there's like lots going on in everyone's life, lots of stressors. So I think identifying the things that are kind of draining your energy and seeing if there's anything that could be adjusted in terms of that. So if you can shift that at all. And then you really need to, so you try to work on your energy drains, and then you need to find ways to bring energy back to you and to your body and to regulate your nervous system. So as we already talked about, finding those moments in between the transitions to do the breathing or, checking in with your body, that could be huge. But finding, and then there's lots of other tools that you can use to try to balance your nervous system and regulate yourself using self-compassion, gratitude. So there's a bunch of other tools that you, again, kind of play with and see what works for you. But it's really about finding that balance. So seeing if you can shift any of the energy drainers and then find ways to build up your reserve. And definitely, like we haven't discussed this yet, but the core sort of pillars of health in terms of sleep. So that would, I would say that would be number one thing to look at is your sleep. Make sure you're getting, 7 to 8 hours of solid sleep at night. That would be like one thing to work with right away. And then nutrition, making sure you're eating lots of plants, lots of fruits and vegetables, fiber, whole grains, that kind of stuff. And then exercise or movement. So making sure you're moving your body. So working on those pillars too is huge.
Yes. So I love that adding the plants. A lot of the times when people hear like we're talking about food, they think that it's about losing weight and diet.
Mhm.
And no, there is a lot of the nutrients and phytochemicals that we get from plants that are like so important for our body to function.
Yeah.
Movement, because we know that when we move, we can sleep better, and we sleep better, we're more functional throughout the day. And then we have more of that resiliency. But the two that I think that are very important as we come towards and is the energy drainers.
Hmm.
So know what they are, have boundaries around them. Sometimes you cannot say no, but maybe those energy drainers, you want to put them in a time of the day when then it's easier for you to do the energy draining thing. And then you might want to take a break between the energy drainers and your nest tasks so that you can self regulate, energize, go for a walk, look at the birds outside, whatever it is that will help you transition from the energy drainers to your next task. But I think that it's important to know what those are and have boundaries around them. And then self compassion,
Hmm.
if we can develop more of that self compassion, self forgiveness, we don't have to be perfect. And sometimes I feel that as women, it's not only that we're trying to juggle all the responsibilities, it's that we want to do all the responsibilities so well, and then it's too much pressure. It just becomes too much, too hard. So definitely self-compassion, something that we can develop little by little every day. So I love that. Mikhail, if anybody wants to work with you, tell us a little bit more about who you work with, what you help people with, and how they can get a hold of you.
Well, thanks for asking. So I work with women who are 40 and over. and we work together to sort of build kind of the stuff we talked about. So, manage stress, build a better life in all aspects of their life and well being. And I have a group coaching program, and I also have a membership that will be starting up in the new year. So, I'm really excited to be doing that. And I would love to work with any woman who feels called to do so.
Great. And I will put for the listeners, I will put the links on the show notes. So if you're interested, you just will need to click that button and it will take you so that you can start exploring working with Mikhail. Thank you, Mikhail, for being here. This was a lovely conversation. And just maybe for some people, it's just a reminder, but sometimes we need those reminders of I'm letting things get a little bit out of control. Let me come back
Mhm.
to what can be a little bit more of that positive energy and focus that we do want to have throughout the day. So thank you for your time. Thank you for this conversation. And if you are listening to the podcast, please, please, please leave us a review at Apple Podcasts because that's what's going to help others like you find us in Apple Podcasts. And if you have any suggestions about topics, email me directly and I will gladly address that. Thank you, Miguel, once more for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maria. It
Thank
was
you.
so nice to be here.
Okay. Until next time, lady, have a wonderful holiday. Bye bye.